Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another LinkedIn Live interview or a LinkedIn Live coffee chat. I have a huge pleasure today to have I think I can say my dear friend Tom, all the way from across the ocean with me for this LinkedIn Live. And before I go into some random rambling, Tom, welcome to the show, and I would love for you to introduce yourself a little bit to the audience.
Well, Miha, great to be with you on the show. I love COVID-19 because you get to see inside my home, and I get to have a cup of coffee with you. And so, to your audience, it's a pleasure to be here. There's a lot of things I do. Recently did my first TED Talk, and the MC introduced me as a Renaissance man. I actually had to go Google the word to see what it meant. But my business is I'm the CEO of a company called Create. That's Kreat, and it's a people development company. Prior to that, I was a business executive. I've done roles from entry level up to CEO. And I spent all my life coaching and teaching and building and growing companies, Mia, and then decided to become a teacher to business leaders, to take all the wisdom I had and help them find the true meaning of their lives, become more successful and healthier. I have a passion for mental health, particularly lifting the stigma of mental health from a point of leadership. Also, one of my other passions is children and youth who come from broken homes, and they're our future leaders. So I have a book and a radio show, and all of that together is, I guess you'll call that my thought leadership platform, and having a lot of fun doing that work.
Well, maybe we can start with, it says Tom, the Quiet Warrior. So some people might understand the idea behind the Quiet Warrior, some maybe don't. So how about if we dive a little bit into that and you tell us a little bit what the Quiet Warrior is? Who is the Quiet Warrior?
Yeah. Well, I thought you wrote that on the screen. I just see it now. Is that what you're calling me? No, I'm just kidding. It is a bit of a story, so cut me off if I go on too long. But the thing is that in 2007, Mia, three major events happened in my life. One of them was my career was shifted because of a reorganization. I was a CEO of a company, and so my job went away. And shortly after that, my wife's mom, my mother-in-law, had a massive stroke, and so my wife had to shift gears and care for her. And within 6 months around that time frame, we were victims or caught up in a global fraud. We lost financially all of our assets. It was a Ponzi scheme, and I don't want to talk about that on the show because we've passed that now. But you kind of wake up in the morning and you say, "What's the meaning of my life?" And you start reflecting when you go through difficult things on, what do I want to do now? How am I going to move forward? And I'd been traveling as a CEO on airplanes. My daughter was young. My two stepsons were still in school. And I was a frequent flyer, not a frequent father. And I felt, I had orphaned my family. But have you ever heard people say, I go to work and I get promotions and I have my nice house, but there's something missing. And at that point, I realized, Mia, that there was something missing in my soul. There was something I was seeking, and I became one of those seekers who looks for the true meaning of life. So I got on a plane and I went to Holland, Michigan, and I met a fellow named John LaDuca, and he runs a company called the Wisdom Link. John's a good friend. And I went with 30 years of wisdom in my head. And John said, I bring people from all over the world, North America and Europe primarily. And he said, Tom, they're guys like you. They have backgrounds in business. Many of them are in the top 2 or 3% of income in the world. But they come to me and they want me to help them take what they've developed in their minds and knowledge and turn it into a business platform. And so the night I got there, this was called the Innovation Lab. The night before, we had dinner, and we were sitting around dinner and just having a cocktail and talking. And John said, "Tell me about yourself." I said, "Well, my background. I'm a C-level executive, and I build and grow companies." But I said, "I guess, when I think about it," I said, when I was younger, my mom said people just want to be around you. They want to talk to you. And in business, I said, I kind of just go from one company to the other, and like a warrior, quietly turning companies around, fixing things. And then when I started coaching millennials and leaders in business, I started helping them push through some of their issues, whether it was business or life issues. And he said, I said, I'm kind of like a quiet warrior. And he said, hey, he said, Tom, that might be actually the title of your first book. And at that time, yeah, I didn't think about writing a book. And I said, okay, let's park that. And well, the rest came to be that The Way of the Quiet Warrior is the title of my book. And my personal brand now is the Quiet Warrior. And I'll finish with this other point that many people who create companies, unfortunately, they create them from the point of view where they are the focus of it and they can never step away from it. They're workaholics and they can't leave that business, especially if you're an entrepreneur. What John said, he says, we're going to build your business so that in a year or two, Tom, you can step away from it and not be the focal point. He says, we want to build a brand around you because this is really about you and your life and business. And we want to build something that you can bring somebody in so you can go public speaking and do all your passions while your company runs itself. That's really how the name Quiet Warrior came up. In the biblical sense, I know I don't want to preach on this show. I read the Bible. I'm a faith-based guy. But there is a little bit of reference to, the quietness of a warrior, of, Jesus Christ being a teacher of others, teaching his disciples. And even when people harm us or we come through difficult beginnings, like my childhood wasn't positive, I have innately this gift to want to help people who are broken, are struggling, and to love those people. And through my work, that's really the people that I help, is people in business who maybe are stuck and trying to figure out, why am I not happy and how can I make my business grow and what's the true meaning or purpose of what I'm doing.
I see a lot of that as well when I'm talking with fellow entrepreneurs and also executives in pretty high positions. Everything is beautiful on the outside. They live this picture perfect life, happy wife, happy kids, big house, nice car, fancy vacations, all of that. But then on the inside, often they are unhappy. But I guess quite a lot of them just put that behind, and say, well, it's for the kids, it's for the family. And they kind of see themselves as the victim. So I can't be happy because if I will be who I truly am, then nobody will pay me this money. And so I'm making this sacrifice so that my children, that's often the case, will live a more free and happy life. But that doesn't have to be like that. Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. It's funny because I was going on a journey in my head when you said that, I just did my TED Talk and it was titled How Leaders Can Lift the Stigma of Mental Health. And in one of the lines in my talk, I'll just repeat it here to your audience. They can check out my talk if they're interested. I made a bold statement and I said, leaders who don't look after their own mental health undermine the importance of the mental health of all the people that they're leading. Leaders, we need to show that our strength is in our stories of struggle, not in our silence, and that it's okay to say when you're not okay. And this is the thing that happened to me is I became a CEO at age 31, and I started in business out of high school. And my family fell apart. There was lots of trauma in my home my dad was a wonderful guy. He passed away a couple of years ago. I miss him, but he was a raging kind of alcoholic and the military man. So you can imagine the rules in my home. And I went out into life and started leading people, and I struggled. I fell down developing healthy relationships. And what I discovered is that I was actually getting promotions and becoming a workaholic to achieve more. And I was good at what I did. I got rewards and people thought, wow, you have everything. But I was trying to replace something that was missing inside me. And so when you said that about brokenness, the reality is when you're in the top level, like the CEO or the boss or the business owner, Miha, there's a stigma around saying you're not okay. And you feel shame and you can't show your vulnerability. At least that's what North America or the world has taught business leaders. Just think about it. If you go into the boardroom and talk to your board chair, and if you're in a public company or you have a board, and you say, you know what, I'm struggling with depression. Sometimes they look at you like, well, are you fit to lead this company? We don't want to talk about that. And Time Magazine came out with a special edition. I actually got a text from one of my coaches, and it's called Mental Health, A New Understanding. So this whole topic about brokenness and all comes from, I believe, the fact that most of what is in our brains, most of what we think we are, is not true. I say that sometimes people go, "What are you talking about?" But the reality is that most of what we become and most of what we think of ourselves is a kernel of truth, like a kernel of popcorn, surrounded by a circle of interpretation. And a lot of it is put into us and wired in our unconscious minds, which is really our operating system. So sometimes CEOs or business owners are in careers, and it's because somebody said you should be there, and they're not fulfilled, and they're struggling with issues that are manifesting themselves in today's relationships because of issues that are unresolved from the past. And a lot of times, Mia, I don't like the word broken, but in my TED talk, I said I started my journey to the top broken in my childhood in silence, to an emotionally broken adulthood that grew into, a dysfunctional part of my life until I made a big shift and really changed that. And so the biggest pressure jobs out there, and I'm not minimizing anybody's role, the biggest pressure jobs, as you know, are business leaders who have all the world on their shoulders, and they can't go tell anybody when the weight gets heavy. And sometimes that's why they struggle in that silence. And when they meet with guys like you or coaches or people like me, they have a quiet space, private, where you just hear all those, I call it, they show up with blood on their shirt and you just hear all those stories coming out on the table.
Yes, I agree. I mean, the stories that I've heard throughout this time, and I knew some of my clients from before they became my clients, and then, or even with a lot of my friends after I became the fail coach. So before, I was just Miha, but then, they started seeing me talking about failure, me talking about mental health issues, and just putting all of my story out there. The conversations that we had before were usual men conversations. You talk about the ladies and the cars and computers and the beer and the next party and so on. And suddenly all of that changed, and people just were, I think, like, they wanted to hang out with me just because they finally had a ventilation space somewhere where they were really open to share everything beneath the surface, and they were just aching to get all of that out. um, Tom, I want to ask you, it probably wasn't like a immediate transition for you to go from that CEO type of person and then going to the quiet warrior and helping people and so on. There probably was a transition period. Can you walk us through that a little bit, please?
Oh, yes. I'm just going to turn for a minute here. Pardon my looking away. And this is the actual book itself. The way of the quiet warrior, which really is the way. I developed I call it 6 phases formula to get from a point in your life where you're perhaps that high paid leader, or that person who's a single mom running a home business, and you're missing something and you need to go discover and seek and learn, and then come back as what I call a shaman or a guide, somebody who has a unique ability to maybe change the world or help other people. I'm still a CEO. I'm still a CEO of a company, but the purpose of my work is very different. In the past, it's been making shareholders money, and it's been selling products and services. But when you put into your business model something that's purposeful, and by the way, millennials today, when they go work at companies, Miha, the first thing they decide in the first minutes is whether this company has a purpose. I'll give you an example. My daughter started working at McDonald's. She's in fourth year university across the country of Canada. I love my daughter. And she went to work at McDonald's in the summer when she came home one year, and very quickly she wanted to quit. And then the values of McDonald's, the quality of their food and just what she felt, their attention to the environment, things, just didn't resonate with her. So when those 3 events I mentioned happened, I wrote about it in my book, in one of the chapters in my life. It sent me to seek, and over 10 years, Mia, from 2009, really up till about 2015, I went on a journey, and I worked in different sectors. I worked in banking, insurance, telecommunications. Believe it or not, I went into network marketing and did direct sales and became a trainer. I also shifted from being a public servant leader, which means public corporations, to being an entrepreneur leader. So I was hired. My first job, I was hired by a president who owned a company, a financial company here locally, He brought me in as his general manager for 2 years on contract. So I started doing these gigs. And the mindset, what I learned quickly is the mindset of an entrepreneur is very different than the mindset of a CEO in a public company. Because some days, as dropping everything to keep the lights on and meet payroll is your focus. Whereas when you're in bigger companies, you have operational leaders. I had 5 vice presidents around me, smarter than me, but I could take a holiday, or if the company started losing money, we could put in plans, and we had a machine, and you didn't have to be the one-man show. So in going through that journey, I also started realizing that there's a pattern I noticed, Miha, about business leaders. These are people I'd worked with. Why is it that some business leaders are successful, depending on how they define success, and others aren't? And then I started learning in my own career through the HR work that companies did with me about blind spots. And a blind spot, most people know what that term means, but to explain it to your audience, a blind spot is when your behavior, you do something that impacts somebody, but you can't see it. And here's an interesting fact, I hope, for you, that the performance of a company, whether it's an entrepreneurial company, a self-owned company, a public company, a not-for-profit, is directly correlated to the blind spots, if they have any, of the business leader. So performance is linked directly to blind spots. Blind spots is linked directly to our brains and how we think. It's called cognitive ability, cognitive thinking. Cognitive is your cognition. And so if you don't take the time to learn how your brain thinks, learn who you are, your personality, your strengths, your natural limitations, figure out why you do what you do, which is really a lot of what I teach, then I suggest that you'll struggle in leadership. You'll never really, we were born caterpillars, but we're meant to be butterflies and fly. And many people don't develop enough character to know who they are and know what makes them tick to actually achieve what they want in life. Many people self-sabotage even their success, and they get lost because they've never taken that journey. So some of the other things I did besides working in different sectors, here's what happened. Joseph Campbell left us a library of research. He studied Greek mythology and religion. And my radio show, actually the Quiet Warrior Show, is built around his narrative that we're all connected by threads in our stories. And so he defines this as the hero's journey narrative, where we're in the known world, which is where we are today, and something happens in our life. And a lot of times you hear this call to go on an adventure. But what he discovered through researching tribes and people going back hundreds of years is that many people don't hear the call, or they don't answer it. They just keep going on this treadmill of life. But usually when something bad happens, you answer that call. Maybe you've lost a loved one. Maybe you didn't get the promotion, or you got fired at work. Maybe you became addicted to alcohol or drugs or something just to deal with something in your life. And that's when we wake up and we say, you know what, I'm tired of this. And we experience this internal pain. I'm tired of all this, and I want to go and seek the true meaning of what I'm doing. And I chair peer groups for CEOs. It's one of the things I've done in my work. And this is typical meeting. This is a meeting that 12 CEOs are on the table. We're under the cone of silence, meaning everybody is respectful and nobody talks about what talked in the room. And one fellow says, when we're doing our roundtable individual updates, where the CEOs for 5 minutes report out on their self, their business, their family, what's working, what's not. One fellow looked like he was run over by a bus, and he said, I had a board meeting last night, and I don't know if I want to be a CEO anymore. The board hammered me for a bunch of stuff, and my wife last night walked out on me. And I stopped the meeting and I said, you know what? We're going to spend the rest of today honoring this person and working through some things with him. He heard the call to adventure in that room, and whether he chooses to go do something to find out really what his life's all about and come back being more happy and fulfilled. But most people, here's what they do. They have a setback in life, and then they get off the treadmill, and very quickly they go back and do exactly the same thing they did before. If you were to ask me, Tom, when you were the CEO of this public company, could you see yourself today doing what you're doing with your own company and your book? And we have a movie being made about my story and my book. We've got a podcast radio show. I'm launching my second radio show called The Heavy Mental Health Show, which is focused on stigma and mental health. I would have said, no, I couldn't see that. But we have it in us, the ability to go out and actually start looking deep within ourselves, like that movie Alice in Wonderland. How far are you prepared to go down the rabbit hole to find out the truth about yourself? And it's not taught in business school. It's not taught in MBAs and in the job site. Uh, Things like discovering your true character. What are your natural strengths, limitations? How is your brain wired where you might have thinking traps? These are patterns or neural nets in the brain that actually can lead us in a bad direction when we're dealing with things. And so I did a lot of self-learning. I did Tony Robbins Mastery University. I met Dr. Taylor Hartman, who created the science around personality of motive. In other words, learning the motive behind why leaders do what they do, not behavior. Most personality science is behavioral based. What I teach is, why does Miha do what he do? Not here's what he does. So I help show people the why behind their behavior. I went down to the US and did a lot of learning. I took a lot of courses. I took a course in cognitive behavioral therapy, which is really the way your brain works and teaching you how to understand that. It's also a program if you have depression or you're diagnosed with anxiety, where they send you to learn. And when I did that learning, Miha, I was in a room of 14 people who literally their biggest job was getting out of bed and coming to the classroom. We were all struggling, and I've been in a cycle of depression from a slip and fall. I had an accident, fell on my head in a bathtub in 2018 when I was doing the ride to conquer cancer, 225 kilometers on my bicycle. And I would think that if you asked me about that, I'd embellish it and say, oh, you should have seen I wiped out on my bike and my helmet flew off. But the truth is, the first night after the first leg of the ride, I slipped in a bathtub and fell so hard I cracked the tub with my head. And the lights went out, I blacked out, and I basically was concussed, and I slipped into depression and all sorts of things. I'm 2 years into that now, and I'm getting better. But even talking to you is a challenge sometimes with my speed of thinking and the light in my eyes. Going back to just how did I get there? Over this 10-year period, not only did I hold different roles in different sectors, I also went into the mental health sector and became board chair of a not-for-profit called the Mood Disorders Association. And now I merged that company into what's called Lookout Health and Housing Society, which provides thousands of beds for homeless people, access to mental health support services, addiction. We run Canada's first federally approved safe injection sites. And the opioid crisis is a big part of our focus. So why did I go and get involved in that? Again, part of seeking. My younger brother has Tourette's syndrome, which is a neurological disorder. At age 12, my young cousin was found hanging in a barn. And on my wife's side, there's been distant family matters with suicide and depression. And I started seeing that in my career with anxiety, particularly in depression, surrounding leaders. And I got on the board to really seek and learn and just make a contribution. What I found is in that room, the people we brought to the board, when I interviewed them to come on the board, I asked them three things. What's your passion for mental health? What's your shared experience? And how long are you going to stay? And are you going to go out in the community and talk about it? They all were like university professors, radio broadcasters, these type of people who we see as these demigods in their businesses. But they all had issues with suicide, depression. One of them tried to take his life with a shotgun on a golf course. And these people, when we were in that room, all the conversations were safe. They were normal, healthy human beings, but they talked openly about mental health. So when I came full circle, Miha, what I did was I took the 10 years of learning and I trademarked it, so I own it. I created a program called The Way of the Quiet Warrior. It's a 90-day mentorship coaching program that takes people from the first phase called the self, which is learning a lot about themselves. I turn them inside out right up to the end, which is the launch of a vision for what this new purpose or life should be, and then a community of people who they can be like-minded. And since publishing the book, we've had 155 reviews posted about it, and people can read it. What I'm finding is that people are reading my book. I wrote it as a fable, hybrid of a business book and fable. So the stories are real. People and situations I encountered, we just changed it. And the business chapters are the actual process I created. But people read it and they call me and say, Tom, your book was not easy to read, but it stirred something up in me. And I want to thank you, because there's unfinished business, or there's something that I learned that I need to do in order to move forward in my life. So that's the background behind the book in probably a long-winded way.
No. That was perfect. I mean, I could just listen to you on and on and on. Tom, what I want to ask you is one particular thing came to me as you were speaking. You mentioned that, I believe, 3 or 4 different times, that everything starts with know thyself, with figuring out who you are, what's your why, what's your purpose, what do you stand for, what are your values, and so on. And it's interesting because just a few weeks ago, our web designer told me, I mean, I have a website, I have a blog. Not many people just wander there and go there and read the blog, especially not from a Google search point of view. But suddenly, during the Corona time, we saw like thousands times increased traffic on one particular blog post. Who am I? People
Wow.
are increasingly, I believe, trying to figure out who they are, especially now in this crazy time when you don't have the outside, you're inside, you have to socially distance, and now suddenly you find yourself with yourself. And it's not easy to be alone with yourself. So I would love if we can dive into that and
Yeah.
just, yeah, the floor is
Yeah.
yours.
Okay. Well, thanks. I reached for my coffee and I realized my mug's empty, so I will uh, virtually drink your coffee over there. You're going to find out that my mind. I've been told I've done some testing that my mind. Yeah, your brain has different quadrants, and I can think on three-dimensionally around things. So you'll see I'll go on a journey here, here, and here, and connect the dots. So, I'm a bit verbose. Just bear with me. Um, Absolutely. I mean, COVID-19, people ask each other, what's the meaning of this? And I was telling somebody the other day that I was being interviewed, that I said, you know what? Did you notice the pictures that were on the internet of the planet Earth and how the pollution kind of cleared during the parts of COVID-19? Did you notice how many companies realized that people can work at home and be as productive and actually spend more time with their family and be happier? I did. I do coaching, and I was coaching a CEO about a month ago, and we had to do it by Zoom because they closed their office. And he came on Zoom, and I said, "Dude," I said, "What's going on? I've never seen you like this." Because usually he's stressed and a bit anxious, and he's got a lot on his mind. And I said, "You're so relaxed." And he said, "Look," he said, I get up later, I make tea for my mom who lives with me. I spend time. I don't have to go in the office, and I can do business." And he said, I started realizing I'm on these 4 or 5 boards. He said, I don't even know if I need to do that anymore. So he started discovering really a bit more about his why, which is brilliant what you said. People, when life slows down, and I want to bring brain science, and we have 5 brain waves, and when they're going all the time, firing and wiring thoughts, we lose sight of being grounded. And so when we're grounded, we can then start thinking about who am I? Let me give your audience a quick training on how to be grounded. I use this metaphor that I learned. And so if you can do this if you want, Mia, draw in a piece of paper now a mountain. Just draw a mountain and then label it with the name of a mountain you know. And so my drawing has Mount Fuji, which is in Japan. I remember when I was a kid, I did a book report on it, and my daughter-in-law is Japanese, so there's a connection. Now, around the mountain, we draw the weather, clouds, birds, sun, hail, whatever. So what I want you now is to put your name on the mountain. So you are the mountain. So I will say you be the mountain. That's when you're grounded. So here's the way it works. The mountain is a large immovable mass. It doesn't move. The weather is always going like this, and most of human beings live in the weather. They're not the mountain. And the weather is your thoughts. So write the word thoughts in that weather. So here's what your brain does. It's a thinking machine, and all it does is create thoughts. So it creates a thought, and then it has a thought about that thought to tell you what's really going on. Now the cool thing is that we're the only species, plants and animals can't do this, but we're the only species that can have a thought about our thought. For example, why does your dog I have a miniature Shih Tzu, her name's Shadow. She's sleeping down here. Why do dogs always wag their tail? And, you can kind of be mean to them sometimes and unintentionally if you had a bad day, and they just, right there, they're loving you unconditionally. Animals can't have thoughts about their thoughts. So if you be mean to a dog, they don't think about it. It's gone. Human beings can have thoughts about their thoughts, and that gets into things like ruminating over problems, worries, and that leads to derailing us. So unless you become the mountain, and there's ways to be grounded, meditation, doing quick breathing exercises, you basically have to dial down the thoughts and step away from them, and then you can focus on having thoughts about your thoughts. Now, if you take it one step further, I learned through my program that I built that in our subconscious minds or unconscious minds, all the answers to everything we want is there. So let me get deeper into that. You have really three brains. I always say to people, how many, or three minds, how many minds do you have? People say, they look at me funny, like, huh? Well, you actually have three. You have your conscious mind, which is your five senses, and you have your subconscious, and then what I'll call the unconscious mind, which is really your operating system. It drives everything you do unconsciously. You don't know it 24/7. 8% of what we use in our brains, that's only 8% of our brains we actually use. 92% is the unconscious mind where all the data sits. We don't use it. We're not taught in school. We're not taught in business, in courses, how to actually unlock and get into that part of our mind, and then what I call manifest, taking the data out of there. So, for example, they say that if you become grounded and you learn to use this part of your brain, you have $1 to $2 million opportunities that cross your path every day, but we don't see it because our conscious mind only is 8%, and our senses just work in the moment. That you can maybe remember 5 or 6 things at a time. But what happens is everything we look at and see goes in through our senses and embeds into that unconscious mind. So someone said to me, somewhere in your wiring is the number of telephone poles you've seen with your eyes as you've traveled in the world, the license plate of every car you've seen. I mean, it sounds crazy, but we have this machine with billions and billions of bits of data. And so here's the thing. Why do people not know who they are, what their purpose is? Because we're taught to go to school, maybe go post-secondary, get a good job, buy a home, have a family, and then retire, the R word. But we're never taught to find out really who you are, what's the meaning of your life. Look at some point in your life, start looking at the wisdom you've acquired and find out what are you really here for. And I can tell you right now, Miha, your purpose is not about your business. Your purpose is on the planet is beyond that. It's something that we're put here to make a contribution to the world or to help people in some way. One of the things I want to say to you is that there's a list of basic human needs. You can find these, even Googling them. The need to be loved, the need to be enough, the need for significance, being the CEO, having the big paycheck or having the power. But there's two that you have to feel full up and happy and fulfilled, because, and the Bible teaches this, all the institutions like family and jobs and health will all crumble. What one is spirituality and one is contribution. So I always ask in the work I do, once I go into the self, the first phase of my program is called the self. So I take people into the rabbit hole using scientific tools to learn their personalities, their strengths, their natural talents and weaknesses, limitations. And then I take them to another level, which is like, it's like, really deep dive. And why do you do what you do? No, not what do you do? Science tells you what you do all day long, but why do you do it? Why do you sit in a room quiet and don't talk? Why do you jump from job to job? Because you get bored easy. Why do you cut people off when they're talking to you and make bad relationships? Because you're trying to finish their sentences. Why do you worry all the time about things before they even happen? Why are you doing what you're doing in your job when you hate your job? What are you pretending not to know? Why are you in your third marriage or your second marriage? Why are your kids having mental health issues? And so when you go down and you start learning about character and all those things, the self, that's the first part of my program. Then once you've mastered that, it's like, now I know more about who I am. Here's another thought for you. I believe this, and there's proof of this in research, that leaders of the world will be rated more on their character than skills in the future. Many leaders have character flaws. Many world leaders do. You look at some of the presidents in the United States that you see now. I won't mention names to give it glory, but many children have character flaws coming through their life. And here's the thing: take this as truth. Just I don't ask you to believe what I say. I ask you to believe hear what I know and reflect on it. If it's true that we're born into the world with a couple million neurons in our head, neurons are little vessels, and the brain then starts firing thoughts and emotions together and putting them into each one of those vessels. So you're born and you see mommy and daddy kissing. You have an image in your brain. Mom, dad means happy. Okay. So the thought is mom and dad happy. You're born into the world and you see mom and dad yelling at each other and screaming, and dad's maybe addicted to cocaine. You're not even a month old. The brain says that person, bad, scary. It's wired into the neural nets. And the brain basically fires and wires those little neurons together into thinking patterns. So most of what is wired in your neurons is not true. It's a kernel of truth unless you find out about the self, unless you dig and do the deep self work. And by the way, Miha, less than 5% of people do the work I'm talking about because it's hard work. Developing character and learning this part about ourselves is hard work. I had to lose it all and feel worthless as a human being and trip up in relationships. My first marriage didn't work. Now I'm married 24 years. Becoming a leader, I was successful, but I was unhappy, and I failed in relationships and getting teams to follow me at some point till I shifted. And then when you finally get your self work done, you can then build a vision of what you're here to do. And by the way, career is one part of it. Career is like the financial model that funds your passion and maybe your dream. You still have to, maybe work, but it's what are you doing to make a contribution? There was a study of 90-year-olds done, and I teach this in one of my workshops. 90-year-olds in Canada, and they said, what are your 3 top regrets? And when all the data came in, the 3 regrets, not in any order of importance. The first one was didn't risk enough. 2, didn't reflect enough. 3, didn't make a big enough contribution. And I want to say this. If you can think about a time, and your listeners can think about a time when they were doing something and they felt unlimited happiness and joy, the time just flew by, and they felt so fulfilled. And it wasn't playing with their kids. It wasn't, loving their wife. It wasn't, watching porn on TV. And I'm saying that tongue in cheek, but there's addictions to pornography and things wired to some of these holes that we have in our souls because they bring us better mental health. But what were you doing? And they say that in the first 10 years of life, the clues to what your really passion or purpose is there. Something that you naturally, instinctively were doing that brought you the most joy. And what happens is we're born like these golden Buddha statues, and this cement crust builds up over time. And so we're born golden, and then the crust of life and everything, and other people saying, dad has a great business, so you should take it over, son. And son never has the time to think about himself and learn what he really wants to do and he's happy and passionate about. Maybe he had a dream of being a painter or having his own radio show. That all goes away. And he becomes, and he gets defined by what somebody else told him he should be. And when you meet most leaders, business people leading the world and children, if you go really deep with them, you ask, why did you become an accountant? Somewhere influenced them to go do that. And the ones that are doing things where they're happy and joyful and they show up authentic and happy as people and have great relationships, those are the ones that said, no, I've done this long enough. I don't feel that's where I need to be. I need to find my true meaning of what I should be doing. And I say this to all the kids out there and the youth, you can be anything you want. It's not a cliche, because embedded in you is all the things you need to manifest or to create. And that's one of the phases in my program is once we do all this beginning work, we create a vision of what you want life to look like. And then we show you how to actually create that using the power of the brain and the resources. I do want to say one more thing. I know I'm rambling a bit, but this is really important, and this is kind of emotional for me, but I just became it's called Kids Text Line, and I became a crisis counselor. You have to apply to be one, and you go through an intense training program, criminal records check. So there's an organization called Kids Help Phone and Kids Text Line, and this has been around since 2013. And they basically are there as a 1-800 number if you want a phone, or a texting service for kids in crisis. Now I'm talking about kids here. And so what I do is I volunteer 200 hours a year, 2-hour to 4-hour shifts, and I'm in a confidential website and I'm texting with kids and they're reaching out for help. And let me tell you some of the stats. There's a database, it's public, and I can give you that to put in the show notes, where they have taken all the texts that have been received since 2013 in conversations with kids. They scrubbed them for confidence. There's 150 million texts, and if you look at that website, it's like a counter. It keeps going up. 150 million texts have been exchanged between kids and these counselors. There's 1,600 of us reaching out because they're on the point of taking their life or giving up. And so here's the numbers. There's maybe 20 different topics that come up. The number 36.9% of the kids texting in who are struggling with anxiety and stress also have these issues. 36.9% of the conversations are depression and sadness. 39.4 relationships with other people. 20.9 suicidal thoughts. Bullying 2.6%, which tells you that there's still a stigma. Kids aren't coming forward when they're being bullied. Self-harm, like cutting, and 10%. Now I'm going to read you just a few more things, and I'll turn it back to you. When I'm on, picture yourself that you have a kid. This could be your child, everybody, and your kid is in trouble, and you're not knowing about it, and they're calling or texting Tom, and they don't know my name. They know I'm Tom, but they don't know who I am. All right, if a call comes in and the topic is they're under stress, the topic is depression, sadness. Here's an actual text message that I get. I've got recurring feelings of worthlessness, despair, and overwhelming sense of I can't stop what's going on in my head. Why can't I be happy? That's a kid. Here's another one with relationship issue. I'm having issues with my girlfriend and it's bothering me. School issues. I just feel awful. I'm in the bathroom at my school crying. Self-harm. I have no one to talk about it. I'd like to stop cutting myself. Suicide. I don't want to live anymore. Bullying. They call me gay and fat and I don't know what to say. Anxiety. I'm so nervous it's making me nauseous. Eating disorder. I'm recovering from anorexia, but I feel like relapsing. Family. I want to die or run away. I can't take my family. These are emotional issues, and I get emotional telling you about it because when I was a kid, I experienced a group of those issues personally. And I see that in people that are leading the world. But these are kids. And 150 million texts back and forth, and this is what they're talking about. So if you think that the children in the world are growing up to be who they believe in themselves, who they can be, they're not. Over 50% of the kids, I believe, in school and universities are broken. And I'm not blaming parents, but one of the things we have to get back to is the foundation of I teach leaders everything I'm teaching to make them happier and healthier, to understand how they communicate and think, but also think they can be better parents to their children. And I teach youth and children, and the work I do here is to save lives. My job, when this text comes in, it could be the first one on my shift from a new caller. I have to assess them if they're suicidal. And if I assess they are, I have to get help, or I have to dial them down so that they can get into a calmer state of mind where they can come away with one action plan to keep living. And here's the process, by the way, of what's called a ladder step assessment. If you said I'm one of these things to me, I would have to build rapport with you first so you trust me. And doing that by text is a whole new level of skill, which is awesome. I would have to ask you, are you thinking of committing suicide? If you said yes, I would have to ask you, do you have a plan? If you said yes, I have to ask you, do you have the means to do it? Do you have the rope that you talked about to hang yourself? Is it with you? No, it's downstairs or the garage. Okay. And are you planning to hang yourself in the next 24 hours? If those four answers are yes, then we have somebody who literally needs an intervention. Now, those ladder assessments is something you do in crisis counseling, and thank goodness only a few percent of people need an intervention where the police are called to help. But this is children just reaching out saying, I need help. And if you ask yourself, where do all these ideas come from in their brains? They're not taught this in school. It comes from their environment and what people have said to them and their home or their homelessness or parents who are all having difficulties. They absorb all that in their brains and they start forming these patterns of thinking that I'm not good. When I became a CEO, I took all the patterns that were embedded in my brain into leading people. And so I was an abused kid, black and blue kid. I had a military commanding style dad, commanding officer in the military. So it was like, do as I say and kick my ass and work at a high level all the time. And he was drunk. So we had nightmares in our house. See, my brain took all that stuff and said, this is the way my life is. This is everybody's life. I didn't know any different. And then I took those rules and used them to navigate when I got married and when I started leading people. And that's when, if you do the real self work, and it's not just about why, it's beyond before that. It's about why do you do what you do before you even find out what the why is. That's when, Miha, the world that without your world can be abundantly happy. And you're seen when you develop character and change some things, you're seen as somebody that is such an awesome person. People notice. And so I thank you for letting me share that. I mean, this is all linked to leadership. These are people who are going to come up and lead our companies. Here's the cool thing about this. We're teaching children and youth in universities about a world many of us won't see. And we're teaching them, giving them degrees that are going to be worthless. I saw futurists talk about this, and the education industry doesn't like this person, but they said that degrees will be worthless. And Napoleon Hill, in his book Think and Grow Rich, said the same thing. He said the education system's broken. Now, whether you believe that or not, I'm not trying to offend anybody, but they don't teach you the knowledge how to apply it. Education on demand, going and taking a course or learning as you go and applying knowledge, I believe that's probably the way of the future. So learning about your mental health and about your why and about how you tick, why it's not taught. And so it's something I think that should be on the curriculum of every child and youth who goes into serving others in business.
No, I absolutely agree. Just simple things like how to Google stuff. How many
Yeah.
people don't even know how to use Google or how to filter? We live in this age of infobesity around us.
Yep.
Now, how do we filter? And especially in the online world, anybody can say whatever they want. How do we, create those relationships? How do we date outside of just romantic dating? Yeah, so a whole lot of things. And I agree with you. And I think I heard that today or yesterday that the 9 out of 10 occupations that were highest seeking occupation 10 years ago don't even exist anymore.
Yeah. Wow.
Or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really like they were at very high demand back then, and now we don't even need them anymore, or something along those lines. Well,
Yeah, that's disruption. It absolutely is where we're headed, and our kids have to take that world and make it better.
Tom, just one last question before, because we are almost at the 50-minute mark. So, in the true following of the Fail Coach brand, we failed at the 30 minutes, and I always fail at that. So, but my last question is always, what's that last golden nugget of wisdom, either related to everything we talked or just whatever you feel is that last thing that you want to leave the audience with?
Three things to have great relationships with people. That is what life's about. Number one, learn about yourself, your strengths and talents and natural limitations. Number two, find a passion, something that makes you joyous and happy that you love to do and do it. And number three, develop character, meaning if there's something you need to develop in yourself, a strength, find a way to do it, get a coach. If there's a limitation getting in the way of you being successful, find a way to get rid of that. Those are the three things that I want everybody to consider focusing on.
Well, Tom, yes, relationships are everything. And we really need to focus on that, on the quality, not the quantity.
Yes.
So, Tom, we came to the end. Thank you so much for being my guest. I mean, I know you and we can go for hours, and maybe next time it's better to call this beer talk and just have a few beers each. Well, you can only have so much coffee. With beer, it's a little bit easier. But yeah, thank you so much for being my guest. Thank you for, so openly sharing about topics that some people are still too afraid to share about,
You're welcome.
especially when it comes to leaders and entrepreneurs and CEOs. I wish you nothing but all the best, going through the craziness of Corona and all other craziness that are surrounding us. And yeah, just thank you for being my guest. I really, really appreciate you for that.
Well, I appreciate it too. You're a true friend. And to plug Miha and his story, I'll be releasing 2 interviews I've done with you on my show soon, and I'm writing a article on that I'll publish on LinkedIn about your incredible story and how you've helped a lot of people. So thanks for having me on.
Well, thank you so much. Take care, Tom. And yeah, I'll see you soon. Bye
All
bye.
right. Bye bye.
Okay, everybody. So, another great interview. Tom is really, really an amazing person, amazing human. What he does with children, with mental health. I mean, just connect with him here on LinkedIn, or on Facebook. But I think here on LinkedIn would be just fine. Go check out his content, his websites, his book. I really, really highly recommend. He's really an amazing human being, and he has a lot of stuff that's really valuable that he's sharing with all of us. And while you're at it, just go to YouTube as well and enter his name and check out the TEDx talk that he did. You'll find that very valuable as well. As for our LinkedIn Lives, on Thursday, we have another one from the 4-hour-a-week CEO series. So I'll be talking about some of the foundations. And then next Monday, we have another interview, another amazing human being sharing their story, sharing their knowledge and their value with us. Until then, I wish you all happy Monday, great week ahead of us. Stay healthy, stay safe wherever you are in this world, and I'll see you on Thursday. Take care, everybody.